I do have the wonderful privilege of introducing our speaker for today. Her name is Ellen Mallow. Ellen brings a wealth of knowledge in the mediation space, mediating over 2,000 cases. In addition, Ellen is also the president of Mallow Mediation. And before, she also served as an attorney for over 12 years before starting her own practice 20 years ago. As a trial attorney, she handled employment, complex businesses, and personal injury cases, just to name a few. Ellen has her bachelor's in psychology and holds a law degree from the University of Texas in Austin. Ellen is also a member of numerous professional organizations, including the American College of Civil Trial Mediators and the National Academy of Distinguished Neutrals. She has served as a mentor in the State Bar of Georgia Employment Section mentorship program, and she's also a member of numerous sections at the Atlanta Bar Association, including the Labor and Employment Section, Dispute Resolution, and Litigation Section. Ellen has authored many articles and has been a speaker for a variety of groups and has appeared on podcasts. One fun fact about Ellen is that she loves to salsa dance, while not professionally, and still has not been asked on Dancing with the Stars. Ellen, thank you so much for being with us. The floor is all yours.
All right. Thanks, Jordan. I appreciate it. So I know some of you have your cameras off, and that's fine. I would encourage you to put them on if you feel up to it, because with what we're talking about, I think getting over nervousness or feeling comfortable, it's good to get your camera on, and it's an easy way to do it. So I appreciate that. I know everybody, like I said, has different reasons going on, but it's helpful for me to see people. So whenever I go to a seminar, I always like to get a takeaway from the speaker. So I'm going to give you a takeaway that hopefully will help you in every facet of your life. I might be overselling it, but the takeaway is 3 letters, and it's the word ask. And it's critical that you ask for what you want, and especially in the context of negotiations, getting your salary, getting raises, everything that happens along the way in your career and in life. You know, if you want to ask for where you want to go on vacation, whatever you want to do personally. So I think that is the one thing that no matter what else I say is a good thing to lead with. Just sort of a layout of what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk about, obviously, salary negotiations. I want to tell you a little bit about me in terms of how I've seen negotiations, the context that I see negotiations, and maybe give you some insight to help you with this particular topic. I do have some videos. I'm not a tech whiz. I'm going to do my best to show them. They're basically just for a little comedy, little comic relief. They're like from Seinfeld and 30 Rock and things that just show negotiation. And it's all the things that we've heard about and talk about. And then I definitely want to have it be interactive. So to the extent you want to ask a question or drop a chat, I'll have to put my glasses on to see what you're saying, but we can take care of it. And I appreciate any input along the way. So I'm going to start with a clip just to talk about one of the main points about negotiation, which is that everything is negotiable. So let's see if I can get this going. This is from Seinfeld. I may have to do it where, let's see. We practiced this, didn't we, Jordan? Oh my goodness.
It's all good.
I know. I'm better when I'm in charge. So I'm just co-host. Let's see. I think I know what I'm doing next. Okay, I have figured it out. Maybe. Tell me if you can see this.
$1.89. Why is this $1.89? Why is there no haggling in this country?
I guess we'd like to think we've progressed beyond a knife fight for a citrus drink.
Can't see the video.
Well, that's a bummer because I can. All right, we're going to put that aside. I'll just have to be funny. I'm not really funny. My brother is a stand-up comedian, but we didn't bring him. Let's see. Okay, we might try later. All right, sorry about that. You know, all the fun is out of it. Okay, so let's talk about my background as far as negotiation, just so you can understand where I come from in terms of what I've seen in negotiations and in cases involving pay disparity. They're typically women who are making claims that their pay is not equal to their male counterparts. But it's not always a woman. It could be any race or gender, but it's typically I see it in the context of a woman. So what I do every day is I mediate, and most people think of mediation as divorce, but I do a lot of employment mediations, which can be sexual harassment, gender-based, race, all the things that you would consider to be in that category. And then I do business disputes and anything you can think of. And every day I mediate, I'm watching a negotiation. So I'm getting to see two sides, how they approach a negotiation to get to a deal. And it's fascinating. So even though I'm not the lead negotiator, I am part of the negotiation, and I'm being asked sometimes along the way what I think the next move should be, what I think the next approach should be. And so it's an opportunity to see the different styles and techniques and things that come up in any type of negotiation. So it's a little bit different setting, right? Because it's a lawsuit or a potential lawsuit, but the principles are the same. So in the context of interviewing for a job or looking to get a raise in your job, or anything else in connection with asking for money, those same principles would apply. So there are two competing theories about how a negotiation starts. And one is that you never, ever, ever throw the first number. I've got great clips on this, but anyway, the concept is if you throw the first number, if you give the first number, you probably are leaving money on the table. So let's say I'm going in for a job, and the job, I think, the range for the salary is somewhere between 50 and 60. And I come in and I don't want to be greedy, and I say, okay, I'd like 55,000. And so I started the bidding. Well, they may have had 65, but now they're going to negotiate me down from that 55. So because I threw the first number, I potentially have left money on the table. So there's no hard and fast rule, because the counter approach is to do what's called anchoring. So when you are anchoring, you are starting the conversation and setting the value of the salary or whatever it is. So the best example I can give you is when someone sells their house, right? So they put it on the market, they do research to decide what's the best price to put it on the market for. And they have to establish that price, because typically you're not going to have a buyer who just walks in and says, oh, your house is nice, I'll offer you $300,000. So they're anchoring the value. And in a way, it's a good approach, because you've now set the expectation for the value of that particular thing, in this case, a house. But almost everything that you find out there tends to be don't throw the first number, right? So again, there's no right or wrong. I think it's often in the context of what you're negotiating over. And so in the context of salary, your choices are, you can either say, this is the salary I want, and you can say a particular number. You can say, I expect 50,000 a year as my salary, or you can say, I expect a range of 50 to 60 as my salary, or you could flip it to them and they could say, we have a salary range of this, or we have a salary band of this. And so it's who's going to start that conversation. So it's a little trickier with an employee-employer situation, because it's not a one-time transaction, right? You're hopefully going in and getting a role for years, or however long, you want to be in that role. So there's some, I guess, it could be a little uncomfortable as to how you start it. And if they say, and it's pretty common, and say, what is your salary expectation? It's hard to flip it to them rather than answering and putting that number out on the table. There certainly are ways to do that. For example, you can say, well, I really need to hear more about the role. What are my responsibilities going to be? And kind of deflected a little bit, but really it's answering a question with a question to hopefully move it back to find out what the salary range is that they are presenting, right? So again, I'd like to say do this or do that, but in general, it's better, I think, not to throw the first number. So how do you even know what numbers to talk about? So you have to do a lot of research, and there are lots of sources out there. And, some of them are pay scale is a source, Indeed is a source, I think it's the Bureau of Labor is a source. So there's a lot out there. The challenge with those are they may not be accurate, right? It may give you a starting point, but it may not be the best information or all of the information that you need to gather. So there are other ways, of course, you can, go to colleagues. You can, I don't know if you're on LinkedIn. If you're not, you should get on LinkedIn, and you can go in and talk to people in the industry. I don't know who got you the interview, but maybe it's a recruiter, maybe it's someone else who may have information. There might be people that that work there. So you have to do some due diligence and take the time to really know what is the typical salary range. And it's going to obviously vary, because you might have someone who's been doing it for 10 years and you've only done it for 2. So that person's salary and yours are not going to be commensurate with each other. But it's really important to know going in what your value is. So I read a statistic that of all the people that go into an interview, only 30% negotiate. And this goes back to my very first point about ask. So of that 30% negotiating, it's some men and some women. I don't have the breakdown, but it's not just women, but in general, women don't like to ask. I don't even like to ask someone to watch my cat, okay? Let alone make a big decision and ask about a salary or opportunities. So you have to ask. The concern is, well, if I ask, are they going to pull the offer? If I ask, are they going to think I'm too aggressive? If I ask, are they going to think I'm too demanding? Whatever the reasons are, a lot of it is just this fear that asking is not a good idea. But you have to be your best advocate. And again, sort of a generalization about women, we're not always the best at promoting ourselves. And it's not just on the way in the door, it's the whole time you are with a particular employer. Because what I see when I do those cases where there's a pay disparity is on the way in, the man who's getting the same job has negotiated on the front and the woman hasn't. And then that same man the next year negotiates for a raise and the woman doesn't. And that pay disparity grows exponentially over time. And then the challenge is, if you leave that company and you go to another company, then they're going to ask, what were you making at your prior job? So now you've got this depressed number, and you could have had it, more in line with what your experience is. So asking is critical. And clearly it's not just women that aren't asking, and obviously not that many people are even asking. So, I think you have to figure out ways to be comfortable with it, but know that employers really expect you to ask. They expect you to negotiate. So it's not going to put them off or jeopardize your possible job offer if you do in fact ask for a different amount of money. So you've done your research. Now you're going to ask. You need to make sure you decide who's doing the asking or telling. And then you are actually now into this negotiation where you're going back and forth. So when you give a range, the tendency is for people to land in the middle, right? So if you say my range is 50 to 60, they might say, okay, we'll do 55, right? So if you're going to have a range, and ultimately they're going to hear it, you should consider that bottom number is a number that you could live with, but it's not, obviously you have to give yourself wiggle room to know that if they lean toward the end, it's still a better number than your bottom number, is what I'm trying to explain, right? So you don't want your bottom number in the range to actually be your bottom number. So if they give a range, obviously you want to get the number above the range they gave. So if they said, well, the job's 60 to 70, you're going to try to ask for 75 or 77.5 or 80. You don't want to just cap yourself based on the range that they presented. So it's all, it's a dance, and you have to go back and forth and figure out what you can get. So you may get responses that, sorry, that's not the budget for the job. That's not the salary band for the job. And it really depends on the job, because different jobs have different criteria. So you need to make sure that you are coming to the table with the background and experience that's going to fit that particular job. So trying to say that, that part about women undervalue themselves. So you need to think about the things that are not easy to quantify, like credentials that you bring to the table, or accomplishments from prior jobs, or things that you're able to show them, hey, I did this particular project for this company, and that allowed the company to achieve, more business or more revenue, or whatever is where you can actually differentiate yourself from your competition. So all of those things, again, require you to explain your worth and not feel uncomfortable sharing that with this person. So if you get a response from the employer or future employer that, sorry, but we can't do 55, we can do 49, whatever it is, then you want to think about, what else can you get? Are there other things in this negotiation that you can obtain if they can't meet your salary needs? And there's so many things to think about. Like nowadays, a lot of companies, as you know, are virtual. Some are part virtual. Some are, it's all in the office. So maybe you can negotiate that instead of having to come in 5 days a week, I'm coming in 3 days a week and I'm working from home the other 2 days. Or maybe, some variation of that is a huge benefit to you, because you're not sitting in traffic and you're not dealing with paying for gas, and you have more flexibility picking up your kids or whatever it is that's going to help you. So there may be more flexibility on something like that. You also should think about asking for the ability to be considered for a raise maybe sooner than their normal practice. So if they have annual reviews, you can say, listen, are you open to me being considered after 6 months instead of a year, so that I can get the raise bump that will put me at the salary I'm looking to have? So, you can be creative in terms of that. It could be time off, paid time off. Maybe the company has 2 weeks and you can negotiate for 2.5 weeks. So it's not just your salary. You have to think about, what else can I get that's going to really make a difference in, what I'm looking to accomplish. There are some companies that will pay for tuition. They'll help you with certifications. I mean, there's all kinds of things that need to go into the equation other than just what your salary is. You also should have, I don't want to say a bottom line, because almost every mediation I do, someone will say to me, I'm never paying more than X, or I'm never taking less than Y. And I always say, really, if they came in $1,000 off of that, are you going to walk? And the answer is usually no. But there has to be sort of this, when am I going to be able to walk away? When am I willing to walk away? Is there something here that says this isn't enough, and I'm going to look at some other opportunity? Because the person with the leverage is the one who usually is the most successful in the negotiation. And typically you think it's going to be the employer who has the leverage because they have the job. But you might be the one with the leverage, because you might be bringing skills to the table, something unique, something that they haven't been able to find. And that's why you're in the running to get the position. So don't always feel like they hold all the cards. In lawsuits, I always feel like the person writing the check is the one with the card. So for example, if you have an employee who's left and they're suing, and they want, X amount. It's a number they would hope they can get. They may get it. It may be 2 years from now, maybe never. We don't know. But the employer actually has a checkbook. They actually have a check. It actually spends. It's real and it's now. So in that context, it does feel like that employer in that negotiation has the power. But you have to be willing to walk away, right? And maybe that's not something you're wanting to do if this is the only opportunity in front of you in that moment, but it is something to consider. So go into the negotiation knowing that that's something, to have in your back pocket. I see something in the chat. Okay, hang on one second. There's a bunch in the chat. Let's see. That is true that online applications ask for the desired salary before you can get an interview. And really that definitely I agree. And so you're back to, do you want to put in something that gives you enough cushion, right? And if you've done your research, then you should know what the salary range that you might be offered would be. Yeah, I don't really have an answer on, how to get the interviews, because I think it's going to be so variable based on the industry you're looking for, whether you're able to get someone who can vouch for you or go to bat for you, someone who can make a warm introduction. It's harder, obviously, if it's, you're making it's like a cold call. So that's not really something that I wish I could answer that more fully, but I think that's the biggest challenge, right? You got to get the interview. So back to, being willing to walk away. And then, like I said, you have to, know your worth. But here's another piece to the puzzle, which I think is really hard to put value on, but probably most important, which is you, right? Your personality, what you bring to the table, your whatever it is. So years ago, I ran a marathon, 30 years ago, to be precise. And I had it on my resume. And I had several employers say, wow, that tells me a lot about you. It tells me that you're disciplined. It tells me that you, are a high achiever. It tells me that you're willing to, put in the time to achieve a result, all kinds of things that these people, now maybe they were wrong. Maybe I just wanted to run a marathon, but it was it was a point to talk about. And it was something where attributes were assigned to me by that potential employer because of that. So Jordan asked me about a fun fact about me, and I told him that I salsa dance. And, it's just another thing. There are things that you can do, but, I guess on a more professional level, there might be something that you've done in another job that you can say, I do have this certification or whatever, but it's how you present, being professional, all those things that seem, just, that I think maybe we take for granted, but they're huge things that go into the equation, and they're intangible. So it's difficult to do it, right? I used to take recruits out to lunch, and we would see how they treated the wait staff. And if they were dismissive or rude or inconsiderate or whatever, they did not get a job offer. So how you interact with the people who are interviewing you, in whatever context that you're having that conversation, is certainly really important. So I don't know, can we get a head count of how many people are in a job, looking for a job, something along the way, so I can get a sense, or is that possible? I'm looking at Jordan. He looks like he's doing something.
So yes, it looks like people are actually looking to answer that. Okay, so
Okay.
some people are saying I'm still looking. Some are saying they're in a job.
Okay.
Latrice says she's working.
Mm-hmm.
But we do have a couple of questions while they're answering that.
Okay.
That was asked in the chat. So Julie, on the topic of being out of the labor market for a little bit, she asked, what if you've been out of the job market, but know your skills and work history provide value and you don't want to sell yourself short? So I'm assuming she wants to know more about, hey, how can I kind of reapproach and sell myself to an employer, in addition to, negotiating effectively, even though she's been out of the labor market for a little while.
Right. Well, I think that goes back to your confidence and knowing that you are still bringing to the table the same experience and skills that someone who hasn't been out of the job market is bringing. There's no reason why you aren't as qualified or as competent as someone who's been currently working in that industry. So I think it's about, identifying what you have in terms of your experience and your skills so you can highlight those and bring in the confidence that you're ready to go. You've done this before, and this is something that you are comfortable doing, and also that your salary range should be the same, right? You don't have to suppress your salary because you've stepped out of that or you've been out of it for some window of time.
We've got another question, and thank you for answering that, Ellen. This one, let's see. Aaron asked, how can we effectively negotiate when applying for a position we haven't previously worked in, but have applicable skills and experiences?
So I think it's sort of the same thing where whatever you're negotiating, it's the style of negotiating, the tips on negotiating are the same regardless, right? Anytime you're back to, should I throw the first number? What research have I done? What is the salary range for this position? What do I bring to the table? So it doesn't have to be that there might be things that transferable skills from your other job that would apply to this current position. I mean, if you're doing something completely different, like if I went from, I'm trying to think, I mean, I can't really go from being a lawyer to a doctor, but there might still be some things that I can do that would help me there, but that's a terrible example. But I mean, the point is you need to figure out what are the skills that are transferable? What are the things that you have done and learned and know that you can tell this employer and promote yourself? Because this goes back to women, they undervalue themselves. And so if you're undervaluing yourself, how is that going to come across to this prospective employer? I have to tell you something else. So I think I told you this, Jordan, before we started, that I had lunch today with a colleague of mine. She's an employment lawyer. She represents the employer side. And then I talked to another colleague of mine who represents the employee side. And I asked them, I'd already prepared for the speech. And I said, what is one thing that you would say? And interesting, it's kind of a side comment, but I think it's really important for women in particular, is that women say, I'm sorry. If you notice your speech or other people's speech, it tends to be part of our vocabulary. Oh, I'm sorry. And like, you're sorry that you haven't done this in the work field or whatever it is. So you just have to make sure that you are your biggest advocate, like I've said, and you are promoting yourself, because nobody else is going to do it for you. And it really, I think it's so important on the way in, but like I've said, along the way, if you're not going and saying, you know what, I've done this, this, and this, we've had these great results, and I would like a raise. But if you're waiting for someone to give you a raise, it may not ever happen. So unless you speak out for yourself, I mean, don't expect it to happen.
That's a wonderful example, and thank you for providing that insight. I think advocation is a key word that I keep hearing, and wanting to be able to understand, just for the people who I can talk to and people who I can share this information with as well. You spoke a lot about research, and I know that you talked about a little bit of the tools with the Bureau of Labor Statistics, as well as salary.com. I'm just curious, maybe there might be some other participants here that may be curious about what's the most effective way to present that research. And I guess what I'm trying to get at here is the topic of timing. Is this something that is done like you were talking about beforehand? So before you accept and sign the contract for your offer, or is this done through the performance review? I'm curious to hear, and maybe some other folks may be curious to hear a little bit more about that.
Well,
Okay.
most of the research I did talks about waiting kind of as late as possible to talk about salary. You don't want to do it. And again, I know we talked about it could be on the application where you don't have a choice, but to put in, salary expectation or salary range. But the more you can put it off, the idea is it's better because you're going to get more information about the position. Because if they say, okay, your job's going to involve training people, or your job's going to, and you don't like to be in front of people and you don't want to train, or that's something you do really well and you can, you can ask for more because you've done that. Those things may not be developed until you're further on in the conversation. So really, when I was preparing for the speech, most of what I saw, the advice was as late as possible. I'm talking about it as you're trying to get the job, right? I would say you want to do the opposite when you're trying to get the raise, right? You don't want to put it off and put it off. You want to, go ask for it when it's fresh, right? Right when you had that great result or whatever it is. Like when I practiced law, one of the big things was, are you bringing in clients or are you just writing a brief? What are you bringing to the law firm? Because the people that brought in the business, the rainmakers, got way more money because that's, the nature of the law practice is you want to generate business. So if you had just come off the heels of some big win or, accomplishment, whatever you're doing, then that's something where that's the timing to go talk about it, not 6 months later.
Thank you. So I'm not seeing too many questions in the chat, but I did have one just from myself personally. You talked about, being willing to walk away, and I think that's so important. And, in particular, you talked about having a low range value where you would accept. How important and what are some maybe do's and don'ts when having to do a counter offer? I know, for some people, they might get a little bit flustered when it comes to saying, hey, this is not really what I was expecting, but they still might want to stay in that employer, right? What are some things that maybe you've seen, or maybe some scenarios where you've seen where, hey, this isn't something I'm willing to take, but I do want to do a counter offer. Can you speak to that a little bit more?
Sure. And this is where I have this great video clip because one of the key negotiation tactics is silence. It is the most uncomfortable feeling to be across the room from someone and they just don't say anything, because the benefit of that tactic is the other person is going to say something to fill that void. So it may be that they could bid against themselves because you're there, right? And you aren't saying anything and they just threw out a proposal and they're like, oh, well, would it be better if we, agreed on this? And so that's a tactic to potentially get them to bid against themselves. And I've seen it. There is another one where you're not actually silent, but you're kind of silent. So there's the clip I have, it's from 30 Rock, and Alex Baldwin's nanny is saying, I need a raise. And he's talking and saying, well, we can't do this, we can't do that. And then she goes, well, what you gonna do? So she flips it back to him. She never counters him. He gives a number. She doesn't stay silent, but she puts it in this position of, okay, well, that's not gonna work. And so then maybe that person gives you another offer. I have seen people accept the first number, which was back to my very beginning point, which is you got to negotiate it, or accept something that's slightly less than the first number where they're really not, they don't want to push hard enough to get the best number. And they don't want to test that that's the best number because it's easier to just take that number. So I think I always say, if we're at the end of the deal, and so here's a classic one that comes up in all of my cases. At the end of the deal, the person who's suing will say, I want you to pick up the cost of the mediation, because going in a mediation, it's just standard, is split between the two sides. And so when we have the number, what typically happens is they don't budge on the number, but the request for the other side to pay the whole cost of the mediation comes up. I mean, you're never going to get it if you don't ask for it. And it's just one of those things where, okay, even if I can't get to my number on this. And it goes back to what I said about all these other benefits that you can negotiate for that aren't just your salary. So I think you gotta test it, right? And sometimes I think it's good to either deflect it, distract it, don't say anything. I mean, they're all just negotiation techniques.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you for that insight. Samantha says always try to get a number you think is fair. I think that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's whose definition of fair, right? But this
Yeah.
goes back to, we kind of know what salary ranges are. If you're in a unique role, it's a little trickier. But yeah, and I do like the point about it has to be fair because this is going to be an ongoing relationship. My example of the house, like I said, it's a one-off. But if I'm going to go work for a company for years, we're at the very starting point of a relationship that hopefully is going to be a long, happy relationship, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, are there more? Because I have all these great clips. I'm so bummed that I can't
Yeah.
show them to you. I'm trying to think about,
So Ellen, if you would like to, I just got word from our virtual services team. If you want to try to share again and see if that works, I'm going to look and see if there's. Oh, it looks like we have another question here as well. It says, what are some general skills in a workplace that are valuable enough to negotiate for a raise? So this comes from Mrs. Agnew, and I'm guessing she just wants to know a little bit more about what are those particular skills. If you could talk a little bit more about those that could add a little bit more value.
is there an example of a particular industry?
That is a good question. Yeah.
Because it's a little tricky. I
Let's
mean,
see.
here's one that's basic, right? Is being a team player. I mean, I have cases where someone was fired and they believe it's, based on some discriminatory reason, and sometimes it is. But sometimes, there's not a performance issue, but you look at feedback from other, whether it's managers or colleagues that say this person's really difficult to work with, this person, loses her temper, this person, whatever it is. So, being able to be the person who's a team player, being respected by people, being on time, accomplishing whatever your task or project is. I mean, it's things that, are demonstrable in terms of we have a deadline, we came in ahead of the deadline, or we came in on time, or I came up with some idea that nobody else had considered. I have this solution that is unique, or something that I developed that I shared. So there's so many different pieces to it, but I really think the personality piece shouldn't be overlooked.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I think so. Ms. Agnews talked about customer service. I think what you were talking about, just those, like you said, those intangibles, right, and maybe the soft skills that employers may be looking for to hire. I think, Ms. Agnew, I think that's probably what you're wanting to look for when you say customer service. So,
I'm so old that now when I go into a store, nobody's engaging in customer service because they're on their phone. And I mean, it happens at restaurants, it happens at a department store. And, I'm 58. So I'm of the generation where we're not on cell phones, we're not texting, and it's so challenging. I just, if I was their employer and I saw that, maybe no one would want to work with me, but it would not be happening, or maybe you can't prevent it. But to me, that's where you differentiate yourself. Because when I walk into a store and oh, how can I help you? And, oh, what are you looking for? Oh, you're looking for a dress for this event. Okay, let me show you this, and this, versus let me know if you need some help. Right. I mean, they're actually there trying to, whatever customer service they're providing, they're actually providing it. But I think it's just something that's shifted. I don't know the solution. I just know how you can be different, which is to be present at your job.
absolutely. And I think, to your point, talking about how to leverage that early on, particularly as it relates, I know in the interview process, that could be something is showing your employer, hey, this is the soft skill that I bring to the table that would allow you to, maybe even negotiate for that raise a little bit later on, right? So
Definitely. There was something, oh, this is kind of like skipping to the end, but I think it's important and it probably would vary based on the type of position. But if you do end up getting an offer that you want to, consider, it is important to take time to do it. You don't have to accept on the spot, right? I think there might be an inclination, especially if you've gone through some, phone interviews or whatever. Now you've done a Zoom interview, whatever the steps are. But to say, I really need to consider this. Because you do, right? You really do need to think about it because it's, a big change. The other thing to think about doing, this might be the lawyer in me, but I think it's a good practical thing that most people do, is to get it in writing. So if you have negotiated for some of these extra things, like more time off, for example, or more, or being considered earlier for a promotion or whatever it is, get it in writing, because what you don't want to have is, here's a letter, you're starting on X date, this is your salary, and none of that's in there. You want to make sure that you've got something in writing signed that you can use, and it's a comfort level, right? It's some security. Should we try a video?
I think so.
All right, let's see what we've got. All right. You muted me. Yes. Okay. I can't even get to my. Yeah, I can't even get to the other thing where I had them up now. I don't know why. Let's see, wait.
Let's see. Forgive me. Go with me here. Can you drop that video chat or video in the chat, Ellen?
I don't know how to do that. So what happens is I've got my folder with all of them on there. Yeah, I could always send one to you later so people can laugh after the fact. They're really, it's just so interesting how those same negotiation techniques come up over and over and over. But I'll have to, maybe I can send you some that you can disseminate, or I can send you links.
Yeah.
So that was going to take a good chunk of my time. So what do you want to talk about? Negotiations? Let me see what else I've got for you. Oh, here's another thought. So even if the negotiation doesn't work, I've got two things I just thought of. Even if it doesn't work, it's good practice, right? Because again, if it's uncomfortable negotiating, then it's good to do one, even if it doesn't result in getting that job. The other tip, I don't know if I would necessarily be comfortable with this, but it depends who the audience is to practice, right? Whether it's to your family or to a friend, or maybe you've got a mentor or someone in your life who you can actually practice that negotiation with. It sounds a little strange, but I think it's just having, again, feeling comfortable asking. It's such an awkward thing. I don't know how y'all feel about it, but I know that for me, like I said, it's even hard to ask for a favor. But remember, they are interviewing you. They want you. They have asked you to come to this step in the process. So they, again, they don't necessarily have all the leverage. You have the opportunity to bring something that they need. Let's see. I'm just looking back at my notes.
Miss Ellen,
Yes.
I want you to hire me. I would like to be your personal assistant.
Uh-huh.
The salary is negotiable, but I would like to stay in the price range between $50,000 and $60,000. I want to work from home. If it's possible, I can be your assistant working from home. I bring customer service, detail oriented. I have very good organizational skills, and I'm a great team player, and I love to help.
Well, I really appreciate your interest in the position. Unfortunately, my budget for an executive assistant is actually 40,000. Now, I'm great to work with. It's really fun. It's interesting. You'll get a lot of experience, but I can't go any higher than that.
I understand. Well, how much time would you need me for? What is the amount of time that you would require of me?
So I need you 40 hours a week, but you can work from home. It's all virtual, so you don't have to deal with the traffic.
Okay.
I'm flexible on what hours you work. Some of the stuff, if you want, you can do it at night. If you want to do it early in the morning, it doesn't have to be 9 to 5 necessarily. And so I think there's a lot of flexibility, and I think the salary is really commensurate with, other people who are doing the same type of position. So do
Okay.
you want the job?
Um, I'm very interested in the job. I just have another question. Is it possible that there is some room to negotiate a salary over perhaps in the next year? Is there any flexibility and growth within our relationship, our work relationship, that I can look forward to something that can help me to grow in my in my space as well as in yours?
I love that you're already thinking about the future with malomediation. That makes me, it's very encouraging. And absolutely, listen, if you're performing well and you're taking stress off of me, I am totally open to a conversation regarding a raise. And I think, I think a year's pretty good measure.
Okay. And would this be full-time Monday through Friday?
Yes, so no weekends, and it is flexible on the hours. I do have things that have to be done during the day, whether it's, scheduling with my clients, but invoicing if you want to do that at night or on the week, whatever you want to do, but it's 40 hours a week and it's flexible. I just need
Okay.
to-
Thank you so much for that, Samantha. We appreciate that.
Did
And
Samantha know that she was going to do that?
No, I was just gonna say, if you needed any overtime, would that constitute extra?
Yeah, I have to tell you something funny about assistants. I'm 20 years in business on February the 4th, and my entire time I had a part-time virtual assistant. They've all been virtual, and then I had a full-time for a few years. But during COVID, I decided to eliminate the position, and I've never been happier to manage someone. But listen, there are so many things that I think, oh gosh, it'd be nice to have an assistant. But anyway, so Jordan, was that planned? Because I wasn't part of the plan.
I got to be honest, that was completely spontaneous. Thank you so much, Samantha. And I think we got some good negotiation tips. I hope some people got some good negotiation tips. So
I
we
think it was,
appreciate your input.
I think it was
I
great.
want to reel it back into you, Ellen, and just so we can make sure we stay on time. And
Okay,
we have
sure.
about 10 more minutes left, so we want to be sure that if there's
Yeah.
anything else you want to share.
I know, but I wanted to share those videos. I'm like a brat about it, but I am really telling you, I feel like I'm going to look at my notes again, but I feel like I've covered most of the issues. I mean, I'll tell you anecdotally, when I get these equal pay cases, it's under the Equal Pay Act, and actually it can also be under Title VII, and I'm not going to give any legal advice, but, typically the argument is that this male colleague, is making more money than the woman. And we talked about, how you negotiate on the way in and how you negotiate as you go and all those things that create this disparity. But, it's always interesting to me, and a lot of people think they know what their colleagues make. So I did one recently where the woman didn't get a promotion, and she felt like the promotion went to a man, that she was more qualified. But once we got into it, she assumed he was making this huge got a huge raise. So let's say, and I'm making up numbers, let's say she was at, 75,000. She thought he was at 125. So her damages in this case were based on what's the difference in pay had I received the promotion that I was entitled to receive. So I think a lot of times we think we know what someone makes and we don't, right? Which is a challenge when you're negotiating a position, because if I am going to work with Jordan and Jordan, brags a lot and tells me he's making whatever, I mean, now I'm going to try to get, my numbers to be the same, but that's really not what he makes. So we don't always know what other people are making. But all you can really do is try to have enough information going in that you can ask for what you think you deserve, or what would be fair, back to the comment that was made earlier. But I do think it's interesting, just anecdotally, that people assume things about pay. Now, there are certain jobs, I mean, if you make widgets and everybody works on the line of an assembly plant, everyone's making the same hourly rate, so that's easy. It's tougher when there is so much subjectivity to the raises that may come. And there are companies that, their budget is their budget. They want to get you at the low end of it, but it may not go, like, you might ask for a number that's just out of whack with what that employer can even offer. So if I go in to a job that's really a $70,000 to $80,000 job and I'm asking for 120, I've just priced myself out of it. So that's something to consider too, is, you don't want to reach too high where you're not going to even get a conversation, unless that's your bottom line, right? If it's your bottom line, then you got to stick with it, and it might take you longer to find the job. Got any more questions, Jordan?
Yeah, I'm waiting to see if there's anything else in the chat. If not, I do have one question. So I'm just aware of our environment, right, and how we are in the virtual and how we're communicating right now. I'm curious, you mentioned the aspect of additional benefits. What are some other things that that can be negotiated? And have you ever seen, the possibility of having a hybrid work environment negotiated? Is that something you see a lot? I know healthcare and some of the other things that you talked about as well, but I was just curious to kind of hear your thoughts on that.
It's a huge thing that's being negotiated now that obviously was never,
Yep.
was considered. A lot of companies some companies have completely eliminated physical space and everybody is remote. Some companies have, no, we're all back to work in person, and some are the hybrid. And I definitely think it is something that is negotiable, but again, everything's negotiable. And that's probably my other takeaway, right? My first takeaway is ask, and my second is that everything's negotiable. But I do think it is. It's kind of, when I do cases, I do see variation between someone's work, setup, right? It's not like, for example, if I'm asking for health insurance that's different than your health insurance, that's not going to work, right? I can't ask for 401k benefits that are different. And maybe it'd be hard to get more time off than my colleague, but maybe I can. But I think there is more flexibility. And I know some people are like, I don't want to do 5, can I do 3? Or I'd like to do 1 day in the office and 4 days at home. So it has the potential, I think, for more opportunity to negotiate. And it's really just their last few years, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. With the changing environment and this, in this business as usual, as I like to say, it's definitely something to be considered. And I just wanted to be sure that people do know, and I think you're absolutely right, that this is something that is highly negotiable for sure. So
while we're talking about Zoom, I thought about something. So because a lot of interviews are by Zoom, you really have to be careful about how you present yourself. And I mean, obviously I'm a bad example because I'm talking about these videos that I can't even do. But I mean, I will tell you that there was one where the guy had his camera off and I asked him to turn it on, and he was shaving his head. He was bald and he had shaving cream all over his head, and and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like, this isn't something you even do, except in a bathroom. But I think because it is so casual and informal, you have to remember that it is that the professionalism that you demonstrate needs to be the same as it would be if you were face to face. It just sort of takes down walls, which, like, I have a cat. I always have my cat locked up when I'm mediating, and I locked him up. I mean, not locked up in a prison, I mean, he's away. And sometimes I forget. And so he'll come and he'll sit on my lap and, oh, look at your cat. And then I have this background, it's a real background, and he'll perch like a statue on the back. And it actually, breaks some of the stress and creates some humor. But, you got to know your audience, right? I mean, you just have to think about, is this the presentation I want to make? And it's just, people, I think, sometimes get too relaxed, but at least, you're not as uptight as when you're, across the desk from somebody.
Absolutely. Let me see. I'm got a couple more questions here in the chat before Cynthia asks. Okay, she works at USPS, and she wants a career that looks like it's not labor intensive. She wants to be in the media industry, especially a reporter, and she wants to understand what it means to be in this new workforce. So I see you bowing your head over there, Cynthia. Did you did I get that correct?
So I think the best thing I've had in my career are great mentors, and trying to find someone who is in the industry that you can tap into their knowledge and determine what's the best way to approach this, right? Because it's hard when it's a whole other industry. And so, LinkedIn, I think, is really good for this, because there are so many people with so many different backgrounds and professions. And, you can reach out even if you don't know someone, and, ask, if they have time for, a quick Zoom 10 minutes, or just to pick their brain, whatever it is, to maybe get some more insight into that industry and figure out what to do.
Thanks so much, Ellen. All right, last one here. As time's kind of winding down. Thank you for being so generous and taking the time. The question is, when employers give you more responsibility, like a promotion, or excuse me, of a promotion without the actual promotion, how do you navigate the conversation of making the wage match the new responsibility? So, yep.
Wait, so are you saying they're giving you more, but they're not promoting you?
I think that's exactly what she's saying, more responsibility.
Okay, well, I'm coming back to the very first thing I said, which is ask. You have to ask for the promotion or the raise or whatever it is that they're not giving you, because they're not going to just give it to you, right? You have to ask that question. And it seems like I'm beating, a dead horse about it, but it's so critical. And I really think women are really bad at asking. I don't know what y'all's experiences are, but I don't think they're good. I every now and then see an amazing female negotiator, but I don't think they're as good at it. I think men, I don't know if it's how you are raised or society or whatever the reasons are, but if you're being asked to take on more responsibility, it's kind of like what was it Samantha, I think, when we were doing our interview. I think it's like, well, wait a minute, if I'm going to do this, then what? What are these extra things you're asking me to do? So I think as far as what amount you should be asking for based on that, that's a little trickier. But maybe it's based on how many, is it more hours? Are you now doing more hours because you're doing more projects, or are you doing bigger projects, or whatever it is? But you definitely have to ask for a raise or a bonus. You can ask for a bonus. It could be a one-time thing. It doesn't have to be a raise. Obviously it's best coming in to get your salary higher than these other things, because I don't think I said this, but that salary discrepancy, I may have said this, follows you wherever you go. So, make sure you're asking for those things along the way.
Fantastic. Thank you. Well, I think that is pretty much most of the questions. And there are a couple more here. And we'll try to get to some of them, and maybe Ellen can answer them in a different time. But Ellen, I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of our team. Thank you so much for taking the time to volunteer and offer really your expertise and your insights. I know personally I learned a lot of information that I'll be sharing with the women in my life, and just being able to understand and navigate this new normal and this new environment. So with that being said, everyone, thank you so much for joining us again. If you're interested in learning more about the work we do at Goodwill of North Georgia, please feel free to click the link in the chat. You will have this video recording just for your reference. But it is Thursday afternoon. I want to give everyone their time back. So with that being said, you are dismissed. Everyone, I wish you a robust and healthy mindset. We're almost to the weekend, and I hope you enjoy. So take care, everyone. Thanks again.